Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second session of our four-part webinar series on Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. We're really excited to have you all here today. This four-part series is designed to give you experience in building business solutions, which are based on real-world scenarios. So last week, we reviewed setting up your own environment and navigating the admin centers. Today, we're going to focus on building applications using low-code capabilities in Power Apps. And in the following 2 weeks, we'll talk about automating business processes and enriching business data with your AI and analytics that are built on the Power App that we will design today. So if you didn't meet us last week, let's give another brief introduction to the team who will guide you through this webinar series, including myself. I'll go ahead and throw myself up on screen so you can see me. Hello, everybody. My name is Kelsey Blomquist. I'm a product solution architect on the ISV success team in Microsoft's Business Application Group. In my role, I focus on providing technical guidance to our partners who are building on our business application platform. Today and throughout the webinar series, I'm really excited to teach you all about our Power Platform and Dynamics 365 and all of its amazing capabilities. And my team, if you remember last time, really likes to do superpowers. So I'm going to use the same superpower, and maybe one day I'll be able to bring some on the show. But my superpower is baking and designing Power Platform cookies of their logos. So I'll bring some pictures next time, but it's something I really enjoy doing, and that is my superpower. So without further ado, I'm going to send it over to James Bamford.
Thanks, Kelsey. Hi, everyone. My name is James Bamford. Like Kelsey, I'm also a product solution architect on the ISV success team, and I also focus on providing technical guidance to Microsoft's partner ecosystem for building on our business applications platform. My superpower kind of changes weekly. You may see the drum set behind me. I recently learned that I have the superpower to play so hard that I make smoke detectors fall from the ceiling. So we'll see what my superpower is next week. But without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the expectations for the series. As we mentioned last week, our goal for this series is to not only teach you how to utilize Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform to quickly build business applications, but to show you how to turn great ideas into impactful solutions. Again, the series is for the citizen developer who is getting started creating business applications to the pro developer who is looking to minimize and automate development tasks, and really everyone in between. Today, we're going to show you how the Power Platform can provide a simple method for most users to be able to create, automate, analyze, or assist their data in ways which we have really never had possible before. So today, we're going to provide you an overview of Power Apps. We're going to start by walking you through the different types of Power Apps that are available. Then we're going to go deeper with a few demos that are designed to show you how to enhance the Canvas app experience for your end users with a couple of tips and best practices that we think will be very valuable for you. After that, we're going to pivot to a discussion of the Power Apps component framework and how you can use it to further enhance the model app experience for your end users. So with that, let's go ahead and let's dive into Power Apps and learn a little bit more about them. So looking at the Power Platform ecosystem, we've seen this slide before, but today we're going to zero in on the Power Apps component seen in the middle left. And what this is going to allow us to do is this is going to allow us to act on our data by creating intelligent applications for any business use case. The Power Apps mission isn't just to allow the pro developer to create apps, but every developer to create apps. So whether it's the citizen developer using the no-code, low-code experience, an IT developer, pro developer, whichever. We want to be able to enable everyone to create any app that satisfies their business needs, right? So the citizen developer could be anyone who understands the business and needs to be able to use technology to solve their own problems. IT professionals are people who enable high productivity app development and implement governance and compliance. And then professional developers we see as being able to reduce time to develop and deploy, and also being able to use code to unblock complex requirements. So those are all the ways in which the Power Apps and the Power Platform can help alleviate roadblocks for each one of these different users. And to do all that, we created Power Apps, which is a great low-code approach to building applications. So where you can do it, you can easily build apps with any low-code, no-code experience. You can connect to data with over 325 pre-built connectors and custom connectors. You can enrich and extend data with CDS, also known as the Common Data Service, AI Builder, and also Power Apps portals. We're able to integrate with Office 365, Azure, Dynamics 365, Power BI, and also Power Automate. We can also ensure strong control and security and enable pro development extensibility using a no limits approach. And to do that, we actually have 3 different types of Power Apps that accomplish all of those. So now that we've seen the driving factors behind Power Apps and its incredible momentum, let's go ahead and take a look at the 3 different types, being model-driven apps, Canvas apps, and Power Apps portals. So to do that, let's go ahead and go over to Kelsey, who's going to take us a little bit deeper on each one of these different Power Apps types.
Thank you, James. So if we go in and check out the different app types, we'll start with talking about model-driven applications. These really are sophisticated apps that are built directly from your data, which means that they're metadata driven and they revolve around forms and business processes that are added to the app. We do a lot of the UI out of box, and so it's really built on the data that you have in the system. And it allows you to design a polished entity form like really quickly. If you want to drag and drop in the visual designer, you can easily create the forms that you need within the application. They are responsive to various form factors, which is great because they'll reflow across different devices based on what the space available is. And there are multiple integration points. These include Office 365, Dynamics 365, Power BI, LinkedIn, also other embedded applications. So in summary, the model-driven app is an easy to set up, metadata-driven application for you to use that will resize based on the form factor given of your device. If we look at the building blocks of a model-driven application, there really are 4 parts to it. So the first one that you see on the bottom, these are the model components that are designed in your designers, whether that's a form, a chart, a dashboard. These are objects you can create and then you can reuse them across multiple apps. So when you're building your app, you use these model components in the visual designer and you drag and drop them where you need, whether that's into the entity view or a dashboard, or if you have a business process flow you want to do, you can embed those right there within the app, within the form. The third one is the navigation. What is an application without being able to navigate somewhere, right? So if you hook up your sitemap on the left-hand side of your app, it that you've specified to be visible within that navigation sitemap. So moving on to Canvas applications, these are a bit different, as instead of being metadata driven, they're really what you see is what you get. Apps that you build yourself. You do that pixel perfect, you create it. It still can be based off your metadata where you can connect to CDS, but you can also connect to multiple other data sources as well. And so if you want to have an app look a specific way and you have a specific tailored, thing that you're trying to create, this is probably where you'd want to go. It allows you to have simple or advanced logical expressions, similar to how you would create them in Excel. And we have created template apps out of the box for phone, tablet, and web. So if you want to start with something instead of starting from scratch, we have those templates for you to build off of. Now, the building blocks of a Canvas application are slightly different. If you look in the center, this is your Canvas screen. And this is where you design what your app looks like. This will be the exact placement and presentation of your screen, allowing you to, drag and drop the controls that you see and place them where you want them to go. Now, you can use responsive design in order to have it reflow, because you will be on devices of different form factors. But it really will look like you have here. And if you do the play button in the top right, you can preview what it looks like on your current device. The second part are your data sources. So on the left-hand side, you can see a list of data sources. It shows which ones are in your app, shows which ones are entities, and it shows which ones are connectors. So if you create any custom data connectors, those can show up there, and you can include them in your Canvas app in order to connect to data that exists elsewhere, not within CDS. So if you have your own API and you need to connect to your own solution data, you can create a data connector with that API, and then you can embed that data right here within the Canvas application. The third part are the properties. So as you can see, I'm selected on the category control within the Canvas app, and so it shows me a list of the properties for that specific item. I can see that there's text and font, there's a position for it. And if you go into the advanced tab of this, you can do more Excel-like expressions to get what you need in those properties. The fourth part is your expressions. So if you look at the top, it's saying that text equals selected ticket.category. So it wants the text in that label to be equal to whatever ticket was selected and the category property of that. So this is where you would use those Excel expressions to define what you want within that component. So you may be wondering, how do I decide on an app type? You have these model-driven, you have this Canvas app. How do I know what's best for my scenario? So when we look at model-driven applications, we really want to use this when CDS is the primary data source. Most of your data is within CDS. You want it if your UI is aligned to the consistent model-driven application, navigation, and styling. So if you're okay having that UI and you don't want to have to spend a lot of time building that out, and you have that reflow that we've built out for you, that's good for using the model-driven application. If you have, to go along with that, if you have limited theming and styling requirements, because we kind of handle the UI for you, you can use the model-driven application. Also, what goes along with that again is if you're using multiple form factors, because of that, reflow ability, and we have that styling requirements, you can use the model driven and have that all done for you out of box. And if you have a need for centralized maintenance of different objects, like those components I talked about, the forms, views, business rules, model driven is a good place to go, because in the Canvas app, you will most likely have to recreate those each time. So then when we look at a Canvas application, what's suited for that? As I mentioned before, it's really for a task-based focused scenario, like a specific scenario that you want to build an application for. And you want to have that precision UI in there and specific navigation, specific form factors, everything that you sort of define out there. It is aligned to using expressions and formulas versus like a declarative designer for you to drag and drop. And it's good if you have non-CDS data sources, because on the left-hand side, you were able to add all of those different data sources directly into the Canvas application, whereas the model-driven is based off the data within CDS. So that's the differences on choosing between those two app types. Now, you can also embed a Canvas app within your model-driven application. So if you do want to have specific UI, but you want to have that base model-driven application, you can create components within a Canvas application and then embed that within the model app. So you can see here, there's a series of images or of icons, and this was a Canvas application that they embedded into this model-driven app in order to get those images there that they could click on and then navigate where they need to go. The final app type is Power Apps Portals. And really what this is for is it's for your external users. So if you want to have built-in authentication where anyone can sign in anonymously, or a variety of authentication providers, whether that's Facebook or Google or Active Directory, we have that built-in authentication, and you can allow that within the Power Apps portals. It's similar to the Canvas app where you have what you see is what you get. You create and manage those pages yourself and define what you want it to look like. And another perk, similar to how you do in Canvas applications. We do have predefined templates here, so if you don't know where to get started, go ahead and check them out, sort of build on those until you're comfortable starting from scratch. I do want to call out the solution checker. As you're building your application, you always want to be cognitive of your quality. So we do have a built-in app checker, which allows you to check the quality of your application over time. You can just go ahead and run it directly in Power Apps, and it will tell you different items such as your performance risks, your stability. It has a whole dashboard of what's the severity of this. Is this a super severe issue? Is it, low severity? What category is it in? What sort of type of issue? And then it will have reference links. If we know that there's a link out there that can help you with that issue, we'll provide that reference link for you so you know exactly where to go to fix it. We do have reliability rules that we add and we continually add, and it does have full localization support. So I highly recommend checking your solution before you export, just to make sure you've got all of those quality checks in place. And so here's just a list of what's checked, from web resources to plugins to your custom workflows. And it really focuses on performance and design, your usage, your maintainability, some of those very important things that we just want to make sure those boxes are checked when we're creating an application. And these are the report, all of the items that will show in the report, what's the issue, the severity, the line number, so you can find exactly where that issue is. So super helpful. And we'll demo that and show you how to get to the solution checker. So without further ado, I will start a demo. I do just want to mention the series spotlight we started last week is the Lamna Healthcare Company. So for our demos, we've created a modern patient care organization called Lamna Healthcare Company, and their data lives in CDS, and they are transforming in this digital age. So they have new business requirements to build an application and do as much automation as possible. So last week we did the admin centers showing for Lamna Healthcare, and this week we'll build a Power App for Lamna Healthcare Company. So I will go ahead and open up Edge so we can get started. Okay, so I'll pull this over. So if I want to go build a Power App, or if I have a Power App already made, I'm going to go to make.powerapps.com. And here I'll log in. So long sign in. Just make sure it's all there. Okay, and here now I've landed in the Maker portal. So we demoed this last week, what you can kind of do here, but this is really your landing page for when you want to build a Power App. Whether you want to look at the data, you want to create, you want to see your current apps or your solutions, you can do that all here, including Flows and AI Builder directly in Power Apps. So what I'll do first is I'm going to go ahead and open up, here's my list of applications. If I select it, it'll open it and play it for me, but I want to go and edit it. So I'm going to go here and click edit. I can also select on the left and, usually there's an edit button. I think that's in. If I were to go to apps, I can also select this here and I can go and edit. So it'll open up my Power App. And we've pre-created a Power App for you today, but we're going to hook up a few different pieces within the app. So I'm going to start by walking through what we've created for Lamna Healthcare Company once it has loaded. Excuse my network quality is a little bit slow today.
So Kelsey, while that's loading, do we want to maybe talk a little bit about the different components that we can set up from the beginning with a Power App?
Sure. You mean the custom components?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping we could see them in the Power App, but sure. We'll just talk a little bit about it before it loads. We did create 2 custom components for this Power App. Custom components are great because you can create it once and then you can embed it in your application as many times as you'd like. You're basically adding new instances of that custom component. You know, let's say you have a label, you have an input box, those are different components. Now we've just created one ourselves that uses those pieces, but you can basically add it to the form as though it's a label. So we've just landed into the app. You can see I have a bunch of screens here that I've created, and I've renamed them because it's good practice to rename as you're creating, so that when you refer to it, you know exactly what you're referring to within the expressions and application. So what James was mentioning before are the components. So here I'm in the screen view on the tree view, but if I go to components, you'll see I have 2 different components here. And these were components we created for this application. I have a title bar component, name and hello to the user, and I have the user label, which is pretty neat. You know, I could just access the user, which I am, and then the full name, so it knows who I am, and it's just placing my name right there, which is pretty neat. We also have a navigation component. So if you look here, it's got some icons, it's got some labels, and this is what we're going to be using to navigate from screen to screen. And how these were added, you know, this is an icon here, and I just went and selected whatever icon I wanted to show here. After adding it, you know, I inserted an icon here. You know, you can choose here, but if you choose the wrong one, you can always go ahead and modify that icon as needed. Okay, and when we created this, we did, you know, in the advanced tab, you can see we did a lot of responsive design. So let's see, so it's using a lot of parent X, parent width, you know, parent height, what's that? Dividing it by certain areas so that it fits in a certain space within that height. So we just wanted to make sure, you know, as it was on different form factors, it would resize appropriately. So now that we have those 2 components, when you go to the screens, you can see those components are actually added here. And that's because if I just go ahead, I'm just going to create a new screen just to show you. So it'll add a screen and it adds it blank. But if I want to go and add that custom component, I can go to this insert button here, and you can see how it has a custom. And under here, you can see my title bar and my navigation component. So if I go and I add both of those, it'll add them both. But you can see that, you know, it's just adding them as they're defined. And if I want to go and do different responsive design, I would have to go and change those. So, you know, I could change the width to be, you know, parent.width or something like that. If I wanted it to be the same width of the full screen, the parent is the if I go back to tree view, I can see that the parent of the title bar is the screen itself. So it's going to span the whole width, and my navigation component. So if I don't want it to cover this top, I would want to move the Y to basically be the height of this. And then I'd want the height of it to be the parent height minus the height of this. So that's an idea of how you would want to do responsive design within a screen. You can also see that this _5 was added here, whereas this has an _1. That's because every time you add a custom component, you're really adding an instance of that control. It's the same thing as if you were adding a label. You know, every label is something different. So when I define anything on this component, I'm going to need to, what I define on this component is going to be different than what I define here. So any responsive design, any navigation, I'm going to have to redo in each instance. If you copy and paste, it will keep that navigation though. So anyway, talking about the home screen, let's go back here. So what do you see here? I see a list of what it looks like my day. So these are appointments that we have today for the patients. So I'm a practitioner, and these today that are coming in to see me. So it has their name and it has the start time of that. And what this is this is a gallery. I went ahead and added a gallery, and you can see there's a subtitle and a title within that. If I go to properties, I can change what the layout looks like, you know, super easily. If they have a picture and you want to show the person's picture, you can choose things like that. I just chose title and subtitle. I felt that was good enough. And I have done it so that it's a view, right? So it's the view and it's my appointments. And there's different ways you can do that, but it's nice to be able to have that view for you to be able to filter your galleries. If you look at the other screens, we have a patient list screen. This also has a gallery, but I was able to have this telephone number here. And that's because I pulled a label into the gallery. So one thing about galleries, if you select any item but the first one, it selects the full gallery. And if I select the full the top one, it selects it in an edit form, or it selects it so that I can edit that specifically. So if I click this label and I go and I move that, it'll move for all the pieces there. You see how that is? So that's pretty neat because you only need to change one and then they all change. And even if I wanted to maybe, increase this or decrease that, you can see they'll all change. We also made a search box here. So, the water text just says search patient. There's no actually default value, and that's good because we don't want it to search anything when we first go in here. But the gallery itself, we've told it that the items should equal the search function, and it wants it to search on this search patient, which is, this is the text box here, and it wants to search on the text within there, and it wants to search the full name property of your patient. And it uses a filter where it's using the active patient view within that. So if there's nothing in here, it's still only going to show the active patients. So I'll show you then when we play the app, when we search here, and how then it shows the results. So on the patient details screen, if you were to select, a patient here, we want to go into the patient details screen. This gives details about the patient. This is a form. Its data source is contacts, and we set the item to be the selected patient from the previous form. So what I actually did, is I added a global variable, or I'm sorry, I added a variable when I'm navigating called selected patient to be the selected item within this patient gallery. So then when I go to the details screen, this item can equal the selected patient, and it will get all the information for the patient you selected in that gallery. It will have their name, their email address. So that's a great way to pass information from one screen to the next and then embed it within your form. And we also have some data tables here, which, similar to a gallery, will show data, but it can show, it's more in that data format, whereas a gallery is more, I have a list and I want to select further into that list. Okay. The next screen would be the medication request screen. And you can see on the left of the navigation system, I have my day, patients, medication requests, reports. So I'm sort of, the home screen was my day, the patient list screen is my patients. The medication request screen is going to be our medication request, and the report screen will be reports. And then the patient details is really the details on a selected patient. And the new medication request would be, I have my list of active medication requests. Now, if I'm seeing a patient and I want to add a new medication for them, I can go ahead and click add medication. It'll go to my screen, and then I can create a new medication request. And the report screen, we haven't done anything on. We will be embedding Power BI dashboard tiles on this in the 4th session. So, stay tuned in a couple weeks for us to build on this Power App and add some reports. I'm going to go ahead and delete screen 1 that I created before. Okay, cool. So that's really the basis of our application so far. So what I want to do now is I want to hook up this navigation system, because if I go ahead and play my app, these don't go anywhere, right? And I want them to navigate to the proper screens. And this also doesn't go anywhere, right? So I want things to navigate where they're supposed to go. So this is really interesting because custom components don't know about the screen they're on. The screen knows about the component, but not vice versa. Because you created the component, any changes you do here, it doesn't know about the screen itself, because you're adding that component to the screen, as an instance. So in order for the component to get information from the screen, we're going to create custom properties. So if I go to the navigation component, you can see over here on the right, we have custom properties. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new custom property. And what do I want this to do? I want this to navigate to the home screen. So I'm just going to call it home screen nav. And for the description, I'm just going to do the same thing for now. it's going to take in an input, and that data type input is going to be a screen, because I want to pass a screen into this property to tell it which screen to navigate to. So I'll go ahead and create that. Now that's just for the home screen one. So I have 3 other ones that I'll also want to create. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm just going to create 3 more custom properties for those. So the next one, I want to navigate to the patient screen. So I'll do patient screen nav. And I'll go to a screen, create. Okay. Medication, screen nav. Oops, sorry. Okay. So it seems pretty easy, but if you don't know about custom properties, it's, you know, when you're trying to do that navigation, it's tough. It's confusing. I remember my first time. So the last one is going to be the report screen. So here we go. Now I have 4 different custom properties that all take a screen as an input. And so now what I have to do is I'll have to tell this icon, hey, when you get selected, I don't want you to do nothing. I actually want you to navigate. So there's a few different ways I can do this. I can go to action and I can click navigate. And then I tell it where I want to navigate. Now, because this doesn't really know about the screens, it's not going to be happy about that, right? So if I go here and I go to navigate, it's not happy with it because it doesn't know what the home screen is. So instead of telling it to do the home screen, I'm actually going to input that custom property. So I'm going to call out the navigation component, and I want the property of home screen nav. So when this icon is selected, you're going to navigate to whatever the home screen nav property is equal to, and I want to transition in a fade style. So, you know, you can do whatever, this can be none, whatever sort of transition you want to do, almost like a PowerPoint transition between slides. So there, now I've set up the on select for that. Now I'm going to have to do that for all of these. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this because that's easy for me. So that was the on select. And for this one, I don't want the home screen, right? I want the patient's screen navigation. Oops. Lost it there. Ah. Okay. Oh, is it still not happy with me? Oh, my tab's not quite working. Okay. Select it. There we go. Cool. Okay, now my medication icon. I'm going to do this for every single one. So, you know, each one, and I have to make sure to call out the correct property when I'm setting it. And then the final one, it's going to be the report screen. Okay, so now I've hooked up, I've created all my custom properties. I've hooked up all my on select. Now what I want to do is I want to go into my screen. So when I go here into the screen and I select this navigation component, I can see these custom properties have shown up in my component properties screen. And I can see they're all equal to home screen. And that's because if I click here, you can see they're just equal to the active screen. So what I want home screen nav to equal is I actually want it to go to the home screen, right? You just give it a screen as the input. That's what we define for that. And for the patient navigation screen, I want to do the patient list screen. And for the medication screen nav, I want to go to the medication list screen. Medication request screen. There we go. And for the report nav, I want to go to the report screen. Now, as I mentioned before, this is an instance of the component. And so for each one of these, if I were to go to the patient list screen, you can see that they're all just set to the active screen. But the home screen, at least, if I were to play this and I go and click something, you can see it navigated me to my patient list screen because I passed in the patient list screen to the custom property, which was on that select for the icon. So that's how I would hook up a navigation for all of these. Now, I would want to go through and do that for every single one in here. I won't do that now just to save us time, but that gives you an idea of what you have to do. Now, if we wanted to hook up a different sort of navigation, like if I was on the patient detail screen, oh, it looks like I've already hooked this up, but you can see that on select of this button, similar to the icon, I want to navigate to the new medication request screen in a fade manner. And when I click in it, you see it, it brings up anything that's an option set, so you can see exactly where it's coming from. And so that's how I would hook up navigation in a button. Now, if I were in a gallery, so let's say I was in a patient list screen and I wanted to navigate to the patient details screen, on select, I can navigate to the patient details screen. Now, this is an interesting one because what I'm doing is I'm actually passing in a variable. And this variable is called selected patient, and it equals the item that's selected within the patient's gallery, which is this gallery itself. So when I select any of these items, it will pass that along to my patient details screen. And so when I go to the patient details screen in my form I mentioned before, the item that I'm showing within this form is equal to that selected patient variable that I passed from the previous screen. And so that's why then when you go ahead and you play the application, if I'm on this screen, or here, I'll play it from home. You play it from whichever screen you're currently connected to. So I can push play. I can say, oh, I'll choose Jose. Let's go into the patient details of him. Oh, it doesn't look like it's navigating. Patient details screen. Okay, well, doesn't want to navigate for me. Oh, there we go. That's right, because I had hooked up not the appointments, but the patients. Sorry about that. Cool. Okay, so let me do that one more time, just because it was a little confusing. We'll go back to the home screen. I want to go to my patient list, and then I'll select one of the patients. So I'll go and click Bradley. And then it goes into the form and you can see all of Bradley's information is populated here because I passed along that contact record to be put in this form. And we also were able to show all of his allergies and medication requests by filtering these data tables on this specific contact's allergies and tolerances and medication requests. And if I were to go to add medication, it would navigate me to the new medication request screen where I could go and fill that in. And we've already populated the subject and the author to today's date and the patient. So I think James will be continuing to demo what we do in here, but that's a good overview of the application and how you would set navigation, both within a navigation component, from a gallery and from a button. So I hope that was helpful. Look into custom properties, they're super useful. I highly recommend using responsive design when you're building applications. Okay, and without further ado, that was a long demo. So I will kick it off over to James, who will continue with another demo.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelsey. Good job. All right, so for our next demo, I'm going to walk you through a quick and easy way to enhance the Canvas app experience for your users by implementing a modal dialog window, otherwise known as a pop-up. There's currently no out-of-the-box control for Canvas apps that accomplishes this user experience. So what we're going to do is create our own user experience from scratch using the tools that Power Apps provides us. And this does a pretty fantastic job of mimicking the experience that we're all pretty accustomed to. So I think you'll get some good value out of it. And I also want to give a shout out to John Weezy on the US One Commercial Partner team who really helped us out for this demo. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, and it looks like I'm sharing. Okay, cool. So this should look fairly familiar to you guys. So this is the Power App that we've been working with. We have our home screen. We have our new medication risk request screen right here. So Kelsey already walked you through the form that we have. Just to give you a little bit further understanding on this form control. The display form control, this allows us to display a bunch of fields on a record or only the fields that we specify. So we can edit these fields right here. You can see that these kind of correspond to what is on the form. And what this does is this allows us to easily create a record or edit a record and save those changes back to the data source that we have looked it up to, which is in this case is medication requests. Okay, so on this form, as Kelsey mentioned, we can navigate to it by going through the patient details screen by just clicking on this add medication button right here. That'll take us to this form. Once we get here, we can fill out the data, and we have two buttons down here. We have one that will take us back to the previous screen if maybe we click the button in error, or we have a button here that actually will save our changes and commit it to CDS. So if I click on this button right here, you can see that on the select of the button, I'm calling a submit form function and then passing in the name of my form right here, which is new medication request form, and this will commit my changes to CDS. But what I want to do here is I want to add a little bit of confirmation for the user. Maybe they, while they're filling this out, maybe they put they clicked the button in error, or maybe they had the wrong patient selected, something, right? So let's give them an extra step before they decide to commit this data to CDS. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to recreate that modal dialog experience. And to get going on that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select my screen. And I'm going to come up to insert, and I'm going to insert a rectangle. So I'm going to go down to over to icons here, and then at the very bottom, or near the very bottom, I'm going to find a rectangle, and I'm going to plop that right there. The first thing I'm going to do is going to follow best practices. I'm going to rename this to modal dialog. Okay, and then the second thing I'm going to do is you can see it's blue right here. So I'm going to change the color of it to something that's a little bit easier for us to see. So just change these all to goose eggs. There we go. So that's kind of got like a clear look to it. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we want to set the width and the height so that they match the parent elements width and height. And this will ensure that the dialog is responsive as the screen is potentially resized. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find the X and the Y coordinates of the modal dialog. And I'm going to set those each to 0. Okay. Now that I have those both set to 0, this will ensure that the dialog is not off the screen. Okay, so step 2 is beyond that. Oops, I'm sorry. So we set those equal 0, and then we also need to set the width and the height. So the width, this is going to be the parent dot width, and then the height, this will be parent dot height. Cool. All right, so now we see it takes up the whole screen. All right, so from there, we want to add some other controls to the overlay. So we're going to add a pre-built image to the overlay that looks like a fairly standard dialog, and we'll position it so that it's always centered on our page, and we'll set the size and the maximum size we need to show our message, and also any other buttons for the user to press in response to the dialog. So first thing we're going to do here is we're going to go up to insert, and then we're going to go over to media, and we're going to find an image. Okay, so we can see the image plopped over right here. We're going to we'll rename this image to dialog image. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and find a image that I already have saved on my computer. There we go. All right, so now that's in there, but it's a little small, so let's go ahead and let's center the dialog image and make it look better. So we have our image selected. Let's go ahead and let's go to our X. And we will set this to the following. We'll do parent dot width minus the dialog image dot width, then divide by 2. That should put it right there. And then for the Y, we'll do parent dot height minus dialog image dot height divided by 2. Cool. So that puts it right smack in the middle of the screen. All right, so now once we have that there, we can go ahead and add a label to our text and make it, we'll make this a little bit bigger actually as well. Okay, so the width will say, so yeah, so as we position this, note that the numbers I'm using for mine may be different for yours, and we'll want to kind of adjust those as we work with the layout. You know, the width number, this will be it'll be different for you for whatever size you have for your image. Maybe you want to overlay the rectangle to only be the height and width of the particular work area, rather than the also encompassing the navigation as well. So there's a whole bunch of different things that we can do for it here as we work through this. So let's go ahead and move this, and we'll say that just for the sake of brevity, moving this along, let's go ahead and we'll leave that right there. Okay, so now let's position the label. So we'll come over to the X of this. Oops. Image. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and insert the label. And let's go ahead and call this dialog text. And then let's position the label. There we go. This will be dialog image dot x plus 70. And the Y, this will be dialog image dot plus 120. All right. And the width, make this dialog image dot width 40. All right. So this is actually not looking the way I want it to, so I'm going to go ahead and just fix this a little bit. Okay. Make this a little bit bigger. For the sake of argument. Okay. All right, so I was cheating, but for the sake of the demo, I'm going to go ahead and move forward with it. So at this point, we want to set any properties on the label like vertical line. The default is middle. You probably want it to be on the top, and also set the text as something that's meaningful. So let's go ahead and click on the label itself, and let's find the text. And let's set this as something meaningful. So let this confirm. So confirm creation of medication. All right. So on here, I can go to the properties of the label, and I can go ahead and I can recenter it. I can go ahead and maybe make the font bold, maybe even a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay, so a couple of things that I can do here to make it look a little bit cleaner. All right, so now let's go ahead and add a couple of buttons to this so that we can allow the user to make their decisions. So with the selected, let's go ahead and let's add a button. All right, and let's go ahead and I'll plop that on here. So let's go find the button, and on the text of it, we'll go ahead and we'll change this to OK. Let's rename the button to dialogue A button. And let's add one more button, and this will be our cancel. And let's rename this to dialogue cancel button. And I'll find the text of this. And we'll call this cancel. Cancel. All right, there we go. All right, so now we have both of our OK and our cancel buttons on here. What we want to do is we want to allow them to actually control what we're seeing on the screen. So, so on the select of both of them, I want to be able to allow it to essentially close the dialogue that I've created right here. So I'm already on cancel. So I'm going to move over to the on select property, which is false. And I'm going to change this to update context. And I'm going to use my show. I'm going to call this show dialogue. And it's spelled correctly, and I'm going to set that to false. Close. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Move over to my OK. Find the on select. Cool. So that way, once the user presses any of these buttons, it's going to close the dialogue, which is what we want. So now we're going to add the functionality to actually show or hide the dialogue. So on the page where we want to show the dialogue, which is our new medication request screen, there is a property here called onVisible. So on this property, we're going to add a variable that we use to track if the dialogue is visible or hidden. Okay, so we already have one variable on here that where we're setting the current date to today, and we're actually passing that into the authored on field on the form right behind it. I'll show you that in a second. But I'm going to add one more. I'm going to go ahead and do another update context. And this should look familiar. We're going to call it show dialog. And understatement. Cool. All right, so now in the onSelect event of the button, you want to use to trigger the dialog, we're going to set this to true. So this is actually going to be in our create button that we see right here. So right now our create button on the select right now is just committing our changes on the form to CDS. It's not doing anything else. So what we actually wanted to do is get rid of that. And we're going to change that to update context to show the dialog. And set that to true. Cool. So that way when the user comes here, they make their changes, they click create, it's going to show us the dialog. All right, so now that I got rid of that, I want to come back over here to my dialog OK button. And right before this, I'm going to retype my submit form and pass in my, what is it called, new medication request form? Yep. There we go. All right, so now one last step is we're going to bring all this together. So we have all of our dialog features right here. We have our cancel, we have our OK button, we have the text, and we have the image and of course the dialog itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to, in the tree view, we're going to select all of them. So I'm going to hold down the control key and I'm going to select the close, the cancel button, the OK button, the text, the image, and the modal dialog. And with all that selected, I'm going to right click and I'm going to select group. And right there, we see all of them grouped together as group 1. And I'm going to rename this to something better. I'm going to call this modal dialog group. And then with that selected, I'm going to go ahead and go back up to the visible property. And I'm going to set this to show dialog. And that's it. So right here, I have a fully functioning modal dialog on this page that will allow us to give an extra check for the user before they actually want to go ahead and create the record. So to show this, I'm going to go ahead and I will go back to my my patient list screen, since that's where we launched this from. So I'm going to click play, and I will find a patient. So let's go ahead and let's go to Craig. All right, so we see Craig here. We see all his important information. We see his allergies, and we see he has one medication request. So let's go ahead and create a new one. All right, so Craig defaulted to my patient, which is field, which is great. The authored on has already defaulted to today, which is also great. So let's go ahead and let's give him a medication. Let's go ahead and write Craig a prescription for amoxicillin. All right. And then I have a couple of different medication references here, and I'm going to go ahead and select one that is already in my database. I know that is correct. And let's give him a request quantity of 1 and a couple of repeats on that. And then I'll change the priority to urgent, stat, and ASAP all appear to be pretty much the same thing, but we'll make this urgent. So now I'm ready to go ahead and create this. So I'll go ahead and I'll click create. And right there, I got my dialog that pops up. If I click cancel, nothing happens. So just go ahead and get rid of it. But I'll click cancel again, or I'll click create again rather. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click OK. So right there, we can see that it committed my data to CDS. And if I go back to Craig, I may actually have to refresh him a little bit. So let's go ahead and go back to, is that not hooked up? That may not be hooked up in this one. So let's go ahead and restart the app. There, go back to patient list. All right, so let's load up Antonia. And then let's go back to Craig. And there we go. We see we have a prescription there for Craig for amoxicillin that was created today with all the different fields that we specified. So to kind of review what we did right here, we were able to create a modal dialogue experience for our users that kind of adds a extra layer of checking before we commit any records to the database. And as you can see, this was a pretty basic use of it, but we can add many more things to this experience as well, like possibly even throwing in the a list of records that may be committed, or whatever. There's a lot of different ways that you can take this, but yeah, wanted to show that to you guys and give you that experience. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and we're going to pivot from Canvas apps over to the Power Apps component framework. So let me go ahead and share my screen here, or share a new screen here. 1 second. Okay, great. All right, so it looks like we are ready to share and talk about Power Apps component framework. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Perfect. Cool. So with Power Apps component framework, we'll talk about, again, we showed you guys how to utilize a responsive navigation system and also modal notification. So let's take a look and see how PCF, Power Apps component framework, can enhance our modal app experience. So PCF, what this does is this empowers professional developers and app makers to create code components for model-driven and Canvas applications, though the Canvas application one is in public preview. Want to note that. And what that does is it provides an enhanced user experience for users to work with data on forms, views, and dashboards. So an example of that would be replacing a field that displays a numeric text value with a dial or a slider control component, or transforming a list into an entirely different visual experience bound to the data, like a calendar or a map. So in essence, what PCF is, it's a one unified framework across Canvas and model-driven apps that enables first and third-party developers to build responsive and reusable components using their choice of libraries and services that are visual, extendable, and portable. We go a little bit deeper onto PCF. We can take a look at what are the different components that we can add. So in answering that question, depending upon the use case, there's multiple different types of components that can be created and added to various places in the application. Some of these include a field control on the form, which you can use to see the budget amount field shown as more of a visual arc, an entity grid, which can be shown in a more advanced fashion, such as an inline editable experience or in calendar form. Some unbound controls, which are not tied to any backend metadata. A business process step, which could be a red circle in the middle of the picture, which allows business processes to be defined and followed by users in the app. You can display external content, such as LinkedIn data, or you can finally utilize external services, such as a local weather website or map data, or really anything else that you want to bring into your application that already exists somewhere else. Rather than having to recreate the wheel yourself, you can just go ahead and bring it in to enhance that user experience. So to show the different Power Apps component frameworks we can make on the form, let's take a look at before and after. So right here on screen, we're looking at an example of an opportunity form in Dynamics 365, which again, this is our model-driven app. So previously, forms were mainly composed of like text fields, and data sets were shown as grids, and they were not really editable in line, and you couldn't really change the visual representation to enhance it and make it pop for users, right? But now with PCF, you can really see the difference between the before and the after. So the visuals in the after, they're really much more pleasing to the eye. They look good, they look modern, and you can gather lots of insights much faster than having to read through all the masses of data and all the text fields. So you can clearly see the business flow of a record using process components, similar to how you would in Visio. In the bottom right, you can see your numbers more accurately, where we stand in the current with our current KPI, if our numbers are being hit, how much we've exceeded in the minimum, and how far we are from our goal. And in the upper left, you can see a heat map to better visualize the volume of information within the data set and direct users towards really specific areas. And the possibilities here are really endless, only limited by your imagination. You can, whether create by you or by other third parties, as well as Microsoft, who's continuously expanding the available components out of the box. We live in a pretty visual world, so we might as well allow our users to gain insights faster by making businesses more efficient and more visual. So when we look at PCF, there are really three main elements that make up a PCF component. The first one being the manifest input file. So this is an XML document where you can define the features, such as like the name, the version control, etc. Secondly, there's the component implementation. This is where you're going to establish the user interface and functionality of the control using TypeScript or JavaScript. We give lifecycle methods that plug into our framework, and in these methods, you can define how the control will look and how the control will act. And finally, we have resource files, and these are static resources that your component uses and needs to be available in the application. Some examples of these could be things like CSS files to define the style, localization files to allow for multiple languages, or even images that control what they're going to see. Also in preview, we have the command line interface, or CLI, for creating Power Apps components. So you can use a simple command line interface to create and modify PCF components right from the IDE, or integrated development environment, of your choice. We have built-in validations and a local debug harness to render the test controls locally. It also includes a automated build process and solution packaging support, and we're always continuing to develop and evolve the support matrix here to include other components such as plugins and web resources. If we further look at the component framework, we can see a flow to show how to start developing PCF components using the CLI. First, what we do is we create a project folder to hold our Power Apps components. Secondly, we're going to use the CLI command to create a new project. And what this is going to do is this is going to populate the directory with the necessary files for a PCF control. And that includes things like the control manifest and code to define the different lifecycle methods. And there's also different templates that are provided to get you started here as well. And after we define certain parts of the control, we bring down all those necessary dependencies that we've defined. And from there, we're really ready to start customizing our PCF control. Something else that's in preview right now is we're offering the same component framework for the Canvas app. So everything we had walked through before was fairly model-driven app focused. We do have this in preview for our Canvas apps, and this is a big step forward for converging the model-driven and the Canvas apps, so things can be reused for both app types. And finally, I want to mention the PCF gallery. So this is another exciting tool for Power Apps component framework. And what this is this includes example components by external third parties, including you, that you can upload to the gallery and that others can use as well. You can download the controls from GitHub today and start adding them to your app. And all this is available at pcf.gallery. So now we know a little bit more about the Power Apps component framework. I'm sure you're all pretty anxious to see it in action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and kick it back over to Kelsey, who's going to walk us through a pretty awesome PCF demo.
Thank you, James. That was a great intro to PCF. I hope you all understand what Power Apps component framework is and how you can use it within your application. So before I go into my demo, I do just going to go ahead and click on pcf.gallery. I just want to show you this live. Let's see if this opens up. So, oh no, it's okay. Go back to where I was so I could share that. And then it did go ahead and open it in here. So here, all I did is I literally went to pcf.gallery. Really easy to remember URL. I highly recommend going in here and checking it out. These are all third parties who have created controls that they want to share with you guys. So you can see there's a lot of different controls available here. There's little symbols here which tell you what they're available for. So this would be a Canvas app. There's a license for it. And there's a managed solution available. So if you go in here and you want to download it, you can do that. You see this is for model-driven applications. So the table versus the sort of paintbrush to see that model-driven versus Canvas app. And if I select this, it'll take me to a page to understand more about it. But I can also download this. So if I click download, it'll take me to GitHub. All of these are open sourced on GitHub. That's where they live. So you can go here and you can download this and kind of see what's all included. Right? See what's in that solution. What's the code that's within the solution? What images are they using? How did they go and create this control, right? If you want to learn more about it, what parameters are here? What are some screenshots of what it looks like? It gives you some information and what you need to install it and how you go and build the controls. So sort of a step-by-step, if you see something you like, you want to play with it in your app, I highly recommend going here and downloading some controls to practice with. So now that you've seen PCF Gallery, let's go ahead and do our next demo. So what I'm going to be demoing for you today is really what it takes to create a PCF control and then embed it within your application. So what I'm going to do first, I'm actually going to minimize this. Well, here. Okay, so I just want to show you something quick. If you were to go to Microsoft Docs, you can see that there's documentation on the CLI, the command line interface, and it tells you what you need to do to hook it up. How do I install this, right? So I went through and I followed all these steps, installing all the necessary prerequisites. And so now I have the command line interface directly in my computer. So if I go ahead and just open up, I'm just going to click CMD, it's going to open a command. Within here, I'm just going to see where I can go. So I want to create a PCF control, and I'm going to go into something. So I had practiced this earlier. It's always good to practice. So I'm going to go into that folder and just show you what I did. So in order to go ahead and create a Power App, a component, I want to call on the Power Apps command line. So if I go ahead and do PCF, I want to initialize a component here. If I just type that in here, you'll see that it tells me that I'm missing arguments. Okay, so I have to add what it tells me here for the parameters. It has a namespace, it has a name, and it has a template. So whether or not it's going to be a field or a data set. So if I go ahead and click the Power Apps command line for PCF, and I init again, and then I go and put in the specified properties. I'm going to have namespace, and I'll just do test for now. I'm doing this because I know it will fail, and I want to show you why. So if I go ahead and type this in, I've given it a namespace, a name, and a template, and I click enter, you can see it failed. And the error is telling me that a current directory already contains a PCF project. So every PCF folder, or every folder that you create where you run this command, you can only have one PCF project within that folder. So I already created one in PCF practice. So instead of that, I'm going to go ahead and go into PCF demo, which is another folder that I created for this, but I haven't ran that command yet here. So if I go, I guess I can just reuse what I used before. I would like to call it something different though. So let's just call it, you know, the namespace is webinar because it's for our webinar. We'll call it demo since it's for our demo. And this is just going to be a field control. So I wanted to spin up the files, the skeleton files, as though I'm creating a field. So if I click enter, you can see it was successfully created. So I want to make sure to run npm install here just to pull down all the necessary libraries and nodes and anything that I need. So it installs, it's quite fast, so it shouldn't take too long. And all of this, you know, you can find in documentation. So if you're struggling on what commands to use or things like that, you can find them all within our Microsoft Docs under PCF. So it looks like it's completed. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up in Visual Studio Code. So I'm in the folder, I'm just going to click code period, and then it will open it up in Visual Studio Code. And I'll drag it over here. So you can see it opened up my folder. It's got some files here, some JSON files, which is about your package and your config. It also has this demo folder. This is the control that I just created. My control was called demo. So you can see there's two files here that are really important. James spoke of them earlier. There is the manifest file. So in here is where you define the control. I give it its name and namespace, which I defined when I did that command line prompt, and you give it a version, you can give it a description, you call out all its properties. You know, what are the properties? Are they bound to something, some metadata? What type are they? All those different things. This is where you're defining all of that. If there are resources that you use, like if there are CSS resources, if there are images, if there's localization you're doing, all of those resources will be defined here, and you tell it what order you want them to load if they're you know, dependent on each other. And then there's different things we've sort of pulled out here to give you examples that you can use within the control. So if you want to go call out specified APIs, you can do that here. So really, this is the XML file, which allows you to define all of those properties of your control. Now the index.ts file, this is your life cycle methods. So all of, you know, when your component loads on a form, when you add a value to that component, when you leave the form, if it's, you know, connected to another value and you need to update its inputs based on the changes of the other control, this is where you define all of that. So what is going to happen when your control initializes, right? What values do you store? What are you showing? When your view is updated, how are you going to update that control? You know, does it have outputs that you need to get to then put in as inputs to other controls? You know, and how are you going to make sure that you destroy everything properly before leaving the form? So this is where you define all those lifecycle methods. And then there's a generated file, and this is where it's going to actually auto-generate your inputs and outputs based on what you have in your control manifest. So here you can see it's just the sample property as an input. There's a sample property that's optional as an output. And this you don't need to change. That's automatically generated based off your manifest file. So this sort of shows, okay, if I were to use the command line interface to initialize a control, I give it a name and namespace. These are the skeleton files that come out for you to start building your control. Now, I already have a control that I've built out. So let me go ahead and find that. So I put it in documents, PCF. Oh, I guess I didn't. Actually, let's just go to downloads instead. Oh, I downloaded it at some point. Oops. Hold on just one second. I'm just going to pull this guy over because I already have one over. So if I go into my PCF controls, doesn't seem to like it. You know what? Because I moved it out of downloads. Okay, well, let me just go ahead and open it the easy way. So the control that I've created is an autocomplete control. So I'm going to go ahead and open this in Visual Studio. So I open in Visual Studio. It's going to open up. You can do these in either Visual Studio Code or the full-on Visual Studio. I like using Visual Studio Code just because it's easier to work with. It's less sort of load, but either will work. So you can see here I have this autocomplete control, and if I go to the manifest file, you'll see that I have it already filled out. Let's see. Okay, so whereas before these were all empty, we've actually defined properties here where there's a longitude and latitude, there's a map key for Azure so it can connect to an Azure map and then display, the coordinates from the address that's auto-completing. But we don't, we just have index.ts, there's no other resources or anything used. And here we haven't defined any type groups, of the properties are all of type single line text or floating point. But if you wanted to have multiple types available, you could do a type group like, for example, numbers, and then that includes all of the properties of different number types. So we have that, and then we also have the generated file, which shows your inputs and outputs. So you can see that here it says what all the inputs are and what type they are. It also has latitude and longitude as optional outputs. So those are the files that I showed you in the skeleton that was created. And here's the index.ts. So this is, when I'm initializing, here they've got a whole bunch of private and public variables, but then they have those lifecycle methods. So when I initialize, what am I all going to set? Looks like we have a label. We've got values that we're setting for different attributes. When we update the view, what are we going to do? And you can create methods within there if you need to load something, or it's like coding. So this is really a pro development space for you to use within Power Apps, because those are good for the citizen developer. If you want to build those components using that coding space, you can use PCF. And it's, we do a lot of the framework there for you, and we connect it within Power Apps, but then you can go and write the code to define what you want to create there. So now that I've showed kind of what the code is, I want to show this to you within an application. And so let's go back to our Power App. So I'm back to make.powerapps.com, and I'm going to click into this Dynamics Health 365, and I already have it open. So when I click that, it opens up here. It opens up to my patients, a list of patients. Now what I've done is I actually added, I'm going to click on locations, and I've added an Azure map dataset control here that shows me pinpoints of where all my locations are based off their longitude and latitude. And now this control was created for Ignite of last year, so I've set my location to be that. You know, for demo purposes, we hard coded that, but usually you would get that from like, where am I? Show me where I currently am. Now, if I don't want to show this as the custom control, I can go up here and say show as the regular read-only grid. And now, how did I get that to show here on this entity, right? Well, when I was in the application, I can go to advanced settings and I can go and customize that to show that there. So I'll go to settings, I'll go to customizations. When I go to customize the solution, we'll let that load. So here I expand my entities and I'm going to go down to location. So once I get to L, find location here, I select the entity and I don't want to go into a form or anything like that. I actually want to make the change directly on the entity. So I'm going to select the location entity and then you can see 3 tabs here. And on the 3rd tab, it says controls. So when I click on controls, I've added this Azure Map control by going to add control, selected what I wanted. I added it here. I selected it to be the default for web, phone, and tablet. And I've gone ahead and filled in any of the dataset fields that were required, which all of them were required. I also created fields on this called longitude and latitude that are both type floating point so that they would use those values as the input to show that on the map. Now, where are they getting that longitude and latitude? Now, there's a second custom control that I've actually added on the location form. So whereas this is for the location entity all up, so that when I go to, you know, the grid of that entity, it will show me out of box my Azure Map control, but I can always change it here if I'd like to. And part of that, it's only showing 3, and that's because I've only added 3 different addresses so far. So if I go back to the read-only grid, you can see in the first one, I have what's called this autocomplete control. And it's already filled in, and this latitude and longitude are filled in. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to show you one that I haven't already filled in. So if I go back to the read-only grid, let's just choose this eye surgery center. Okay. So if I and I want to go search for this, I can do eye surgery, and you can see how things are automatically coming in, right? And this was a custom control that I created and I imported into this, added it to the form, and now I can go ahead and use the autocomplete control searching for items. So whether that's a word or whether I'm using, you know, like an address, it will show, you know, all the different autocomplete options that we have. But if I just put in the name of the actual place, I can see, oh, here, I'm just going to go ahead and select that. Now, I put the outputs, the latitude and longitude outputs into these fields. And so you can see they automatically populate these fields. And when these fields populate, they're also going directly to that Azure map, because when I customized it, I chose that Azure map. Remember when I clicked Azure Map Control, I wanted the longitude and latitude fields on that form to be the inputs for this map. So it's showing me, you know, little dots where all of the addresses are for each of the items in that data set. In this case, it's the location entity. So any of those locations that have a latitude and longitude showing will show on this Azure map because of how I've defined to get those points. Right, so the one I just added, I'm not sure where it is now, but yeah. So I also wanted to show you how I customize the autocomplete control. So you saw that I added this Azure Map control and I linked it to that longitude and latitude. Now, if I go to the form and I go to the main form, as it loads. So this is all on the model-driven app, but as James said, there are specific, you know, components that you can now import into the Canvas app as well and embed those in your application there. But if I see here, I have the location form and I have this autocomplete control in longitude, latitude. So if I double click into the autocomplete control, I can see all these different tabs, and the last one again is controls. So I go and click that, and similar to how we saw in the entity grid, you can go and you can add a control, whatever is of that type. And I selected the address autocomplete, and then I filled in what was necessary in order for you to have that latitude and longitude And I had to use my own Azure map. You guys will have to use an Azure map if you, were to use controls like this as well. So, and I defaulted them to that. So you can see that that field will always show up as an autocomplete control, not just a traditional text box. So that's how I set the field and the entity to be a custom control. And that's why, when you then go into the application, if I go into the location entity grid, it defaults to that Azure map, which is great. I can scroll around, I can look at it. It gives me that visual of the location that I want. Or I can go back to the read-only grid, and I can go into, any one of these and fill in that autocomplete control so that it will automatically, put in those latitude and longitude values. So that's what I had to show you guys for PCF components, creating them from the command line, embedding them within your form. And how I would have done this is I had pre-installed these, but if you go to your solutions, once you're finished creating your control, you can, package it up in a zip file. And then I went and imported those two controls into my solution so that they showed up and I was able to customize the form using them. Okay, so now that we have completed that demo, we're just about done. I know we're a little bit over time, so thanks for bearing with us. But just as a recap, what did we cover today? We gave you guys an understanding of Power Apps and how it empowers every developer to do more, not just the pro developer, but those citizen developers and those IT developers too. We talked about how to use components to easily wire up reusable navigation system. That was that first demo I did where, I hooked up the navigation for that custom component we had created, and we had navigated from one screen to another, passing in a variable. James demoed how to create a pop-up window to display on screen, when a user were to commit an action, so that you have that response and there were changes that were made. And then we did an overview of Power Apps component framework and showed you how to use the command line interface and how to embed a PCF control within your form. For next week, we'll be focusing on automating business processes, and we'll be going over Power Automate and Power Virtual Agents, where we can build a virtual bot. So with that, we will take some questions and go a little bit over so that we can make sure to get some of those questions answered. So I'll kick it over to James to see if he had looked over any questions while I was just demoing, to see if we can get any started with.
I did. So let me go ahead and scroll through a couple of these here. So there was a good PCF question. Okay, so Harish asks about custom properties. Do they work only with pre-selected property types, or can we write our own custom property?
That's a good question. I'm actually unsure. I'm wondering if we were to go in there, if I go back into, oops, where I was. So if we go into the demo and we go to the custom properties, let's just see here quick. So if I go to new, it does give me a set of them, and it doesn't look like I can, add anything that's not there. So at least for right now, it seems for a custom property, we already have those set. That's something we can follow up on just to make sure that that's the case. But from this, it doesn't seem like, there's anywhere I can do that.
Cool. All right, so let's find another one here. So some people have been asking if there's a good place to go to, I guess, find out more information, find out some examples of expressions and things like that. So we didn't show you guys here, but many of this information is available over on Microsoft Docs. So if you do a internet search for Microsoft Docs and then Power Apps and really whatever you're looking for, that's a great place to go to get you started. There's lots of, besides docs on the different expressions that are out there and the different controls and properties, there are also many different learning videos available there as well. And Kelsey actually scrolled through some of those on the learning section inside of the first tab she has open here inside of the tenant. So yeah, on the second right there. So there's lots of places to go to get started. You can certainly get going here to learn kind of some basic stuff. But also Microsoft Docs is a great resource to go to find out that sort of information about those. Kelsey, can you think of any other places that might be helpful for them to go to learn a little bit more?
Not particularly. James and I also host an open hack, which allows you to learn about the Power Platform. So, you know, we're slowly working that out, but there are different things like open hacks, you know, app in a day, you know, Power App airlifts. There are a lot of different workshops that we also host to allow you to get that deeper hands-on learning with it. You know, if you don't just go to Docs and this, you know, learning here. There is LinkedIn Learning as well. I know that has got a lot of learning opportunities and people have been focusing on the Power Platform there as well.
Yeah, App in a Day is a great one to call out. So if you're looking to really just get started with your learning, App in a Day is it's free. You can go at your own pace, and it literally takes about a day, so it's aptly named to get through. And it will take you through not just Power Apps, but it will also get you started on other Power Platform capabilities like Power Automate, Power BI, etc. So it'll be a great place for you to build your base understanding of the platform, and then that way you can go a little bit deeper on some of the things that we've already talked about today, where we're going a little bit more above the L100 level.
And what I showed you on here is I just typed in ak.ms/app in a day, and when I push enter, it actually downloads the hands-on lab directly for you. So, you know, I can open that in my folder and then I can go ahead. It has your labs, it has all of that, and it's a really great resource. There's also a dashboard in a day for Power BI and different things like that, but we'll get into those later.
Yep.
Good
cool.
question.
Yeah, good questions.
So I do see someone's asking a performance question, you know, how does an app like this handle if there are 100 versus 10,000 patients? And I know performance is really important. So we do have performance on the back end where when we're loading things, if we realize that, you know, it's a big data set, we're going to be smart about how we're loading them. You know, if they're not all going to visibly show on the form at one time, we're most likely not going to be loading all of those until, you know, we'll load a set that we think will be showing, and then that'll incrementally load sort of as the whole page loads. So we do take performance in consideration, especially when working with large data sets.
Awesome. Okay, well, I think we're about 10 minutes over, so we want to be cognizant of your time. So we will probably use this time to sign off for the day. So yeah, thank you everyone for taking the time to join our session today. I certainly hope you got a lot out of it, and we will be sharing many of the different files and apps and everything like that we showed you here today. Those will be shown on GitHub, so check that out. We'll be posting those up here probably within the next couple of days. So for me, thanks very much for joining.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciated your time and your energy and all your questions. And we hope that, you know, you can go create a PCF component and your first Power App if you haven't already. So best of luck out there, and we look forward to having you for the other two parts of our webinar series. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.